Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who view their own bodies as a submissive domestic animal and suffice to give it, every month, the penance of a few hours of sleep, a bit of water, and a scrap of meat. Each month we spin the wheel and land on a different genre or topic or idea, and we read 4 or 5 stories about it. Right now, we are doing immortality stories, including this one, Jorge Luis Borges' The Immortal. I'm Zach, and this week I am really interested in the kind of scrapbooky nature of this, the pastiche of all of these different ideas and scenes and feelings and references. It's so fun.
I'm Bob, and I'm interested in connecting this to Boat of a Million Years by Paul Anderson, because when we read that, I was wondering, if you really live for 1,000 years, if you live for a long time, how do you not forget yourself? And in this story, in Borges' story, it feels like you do forget yourself, but you sometimes recollect who you were before. This is such a strange story. We have the leader of a century, a Roman soldier. This, I guess you'd call it, was he a centurion or the leader of the centurion? So he's a famous Roman soldier, at least trying to be famous, and it just doesn't pay off. He meets a guy who's dying, who says, I'm trying to find the river that gives you immortality. He lets him die, and he goes off in search of it by himself, killing his whole crew because the mission is so dangerous. But he comes to this place where all of these people are on the bank, and they just seem to be eating snakes. They don't seem to be doing anything else. They do, as one does.
Troglodytes, which I thought was really fun.
Troglodytes. Yeah, and they're just there. They don't seem to have any emotion. But he's trying to find this ancient city. Now, this Borges really liked writing about labyrinths, and this is also collected in a story called Labyrinths. But he goes through a labyrinth for hours and hours and hours and days, finally finds this city. Now, this city is supposed to be this beautiful, amazing city. It looks like God's made it, but when he gets there, it just looks absolutely insane, and we find out why eventually. But as he's going through, he does meet these immortals, but the immortals are a little bit shocking. And one reason they're strange is they seem to have memories from many years ago. He calls one of these guys Argos, and the guy eventually starts talking to him. They find out, oh my God, this might be Homer, because he says, yes, it was 1,100 years since I last wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. So he might have written it a few different times. It is a very strange story.
Yeah. And it's interesting the way that this is told, because we have been reading every short story in the Weird anthology by Anne and Jeff Vandermeer. It's basically just a primer on weird fiction history. And Borges himself is included in that anthology. But this short story does something which almost every one of those short stories we read in the Weird anthology does, which is they give us a found text or an overheard story, or a kind of, a rumor whispered in the wind, and we're just reporting back what we heard. And the way that this one does it is it gives us someone buying a 6-volume set. And this manuscript in which we are reading about this is tucked within the final volume. So there's this sense in which we as readers don't quite know whether to take it as fact or fiction. Is it autobiography or is it just a tall tale? But to connect this to what you were saying about language, there are great and interesting clues that the bookseller, Joseph Cartaphilus, which not etymologically, but in Latin, carta is paper and philis is love. He loves his books. He's a bookseller, Cartaphilus. He is this immortal man, is what the suggestion is. Now, the way he portrays Cartaphilus is he's stitching together many different languages with fluency and ignorance, is what it says about him. So as he talks, he kind of drifts in and out, from language to language, but he's not very good at them. He's very accurate with the way he sounds, is kind of what I understand that to mean. Like, he can speak with fluency, but also ignorance. So the kind of rapid speech you get from someone who maybe lives in a country for a number of years, but maybe was not born there, they don't quite always understand exactly the full connotation of what they're saying. And experientially, like as someone who lives forever, I love this idea of having like not just this kind of like broad but shallow grasp of human culture worldwide, but also the idea that in some sense, this knowledge is too much for one human brain. And he seems to be struggling to wield it. Like in one conversation, it lists 4 languages that he drifts in and out of. I thought that was a really good detail.
Well, it reminds us, like we in Book of Skulls, you know, the people who are trying, the Robert Silverberg's book, the 4 guys who are trying to become immortal, one starts making plans and he says, okay, for the first 200 years, I'll do this. For the next 300 years, I'll do this. In Boat of a Million Years, these people live for 1,000 years, 2,000 years. There is one who starts to forget what he's doing, whether he's immortal, what his point is, but the others seem to remember who they are, at least their core person, for very, very long. But you're right, in this, Cardophilus, he's going in and out of languages. He's even written books in a certain language and then completely forgotten that language, forgotten even the letters of that language because so much time has passed. He says that he traveled over new kingdoms, new empires in the fall of 1066, and he goes up to almost present day. It's interesting that here people truly do forget. And I think Borges has an interesting point, again, very labyrinthine, but this idea of if Homer composes the Odyssey, he says, if we postulate an infinite period of time with infinite circumstances and changes, the impossible thing is not to compose the Odyssey at least once. No one is anyone. One single immortal man is all men. And then he talks about Agrippa. He says, like Cornelius Agrippa, I am God, I am hero, I am philosopher, and I am demon, and I am world, which is a tedious way of saying that I do not exist. So I feel like that is why the troglodytes are just there and they stop caring about anything, or sometimes they care and sometimes they don't. They exist forever. And if you do exist forever, you contain infinite possibilities within yourself. So you will, of course, write Homer's Odyssey at least once.
There's a really great moment where he kind of describes the experience of being one of these troglodytes. He says, I thought that Argos and I participated in different universes. I thought that our perceptions were the same, but that he combined them in another way and made other objects of them. I thought that perhaps there were no objects for him, only a vertiginous and continuous play of extremely brief impressions. I thought of a world without memory, without time. I considered the possibility of a language without nouns, a language of impersonal verbs or indeclinable epithets. Thus the days went on, dying, and with them the years. But something akin to happiness happened one morning. It rained. But I really want to connect this idea to what you were saying, you know, the connection to like Agrippa, or, you know, this idea that you contain every possible, archetype, every possible mode of being within you. You know, your world, your God, your demon, your magician, your philosopher, your everything. And that in the end makes you nothing. And this description of that, those are all grand psychological, identities. Those are all identities in which you could slip in and out of. And that's on a very macroscopic level. But on a microscopic level, on the day-to-day ephemera, it has to just become a wash, like a watercolor painting that has been, rained on, and everything just kind of blurs together. And what that paragraph gave me was the first time in any of our immortality books that we've read where I felt like that psychological experience of being immortal and lasting forever and seeing it all and doing it all was accurately captured.
Do you think, though, it's impossible to really imagine an infinite person, not just, you'll live for the remainder of history. You will live forever and contain all possibilities within you. Does it feel reasonable to say if that happened to someone, they would just sit in a pit for 70 years? Because what is the quote here? It says that they stop caring about pity. They stop having any emotions because it's all a balance. They've had them before. They don't care anymore. It says that because of his past virtues, every man is worthy of all goodness, but also of all perversity because of his infamy in the past or future. And it's the same with caring about others. The guy is in there for 70 years, and it's not like he's not hungry. He's just starving for 70 years, but he doesn't care because he's just thinking.
Yeah.
But then what? Yeah. Do you think, if a consciousness, or if someone's memories, or if a personality, if someone did really go on forever, if they could extend themselves through eternity, would that happen? Would you stop caring about anything?
Maybe. I mean, that seems to be a recurring thing in some of the books we read, which is, if you don't have death as a natural bookend to your life, you tend to lose the meaning of the narrative. You lose the plot, basically, is what goes on. And, would you eat if you didn't have to eat to survive? I mean, maybe if you really enjoy eating, sure. I enjoy eating, but would I get bored of eating after, 800 years of it? I'm 35 and I'm already kind of getting bored of eating. You know what I mean?
I think at one point they start talking about, okay, so animals seem to also be immortal because they don't really realize they're dying. They just one day die. Who knows if that's really true? I don't think that's exactly right. But he says that humans will despair, or they know they'll eventually die, and they can have that kind of anxiety, and that gives them an oomph to do something that matters to them before they do die. Do you think these immortals, they just become almost like rocks? I mean, they don't even really exist as people. Do you feel like if this would happen, you would not just lose the lust for life, but also would you lose the quality or the capacity for being human?
Well, it's really interesting because, I mean, that is what happens, but look at how this character gets his lust for life back. He learns that just as there is water that you can drink to make you immortal coming from a stream, there's somewhere in the world there must exist a stream that will return mortality to you. And that gives him that gives him his lust for life back. I mean, I guess maybe we could call it a lust for death, but he sets off from the city of the immortals at that point because his life now has a new meaning. And by God, he finds it, And maybe he's happy at that moment. I don't know. It seems like he's happy.
Earlier, when we read Dr. Futurity by Philip K. Dick, that same question kind of comes up, but it's built into a society where society lives forever and each individual must die, and we can't really worry too much about the individual. But here in Borges, the immortal Borges writes, death, or its illusion, makes men precious and pathetic. They are moving because of their phantom condition. Every act they execute may be their last. There is not a face that is on the verge of dissolving like a face in a dream. So death makes them precious and pathetic. They worry, but also they cling to life. Do you feel like this is similar in a way to Dr. Futurity, where there's a society built around death? However, this is its kind of horrifying opposite.
I think that, when you have these speculative books that are presenting these grand ideas, and what we're offering here is dystopia or utopia, and those are very slippery terms that oftentimes blend into each other. But in Philip K. Dick's novel, it was presented as dystopia. Here, I think that he sought it thinking it would be utopia, but in actuality, it turned out to be dystopia. And I think that that echoes what we saw with Paul Anderson's Boat of a Million Years, where when Earth finally became totally immortal, that was the moment that it declined and ultimately failed. Now, interestingly, the other book we read, which you already mentioned, Robert Silverberg's Book of Skulls, they also, these supposed immortals, it's never confirmed they actually are, these supposed immortals are living in a kind of, I don't know what you call it, like a cult compound, a hermitage, whatever commune, the hell it is. Yeah, a commune. But the actual political structures of this place are never actually, it doesn't give us that through a utopian or dystopian lens. It only gives us an outsider's perspective, but an outsider who cannot peer within and who does not understand what they're seeing, as opposed to most other places, and especially this one, where the outsider comes in and gives us a full read, a full report back of the situation.
You know what this story really reminded me as far as like the experience of immortality, Book of Skulls, the lust for immortality, Boat of a Million Years, life and history just keeps on going. This made me think of when you play a video game and you just set down the controller and then the character just stays there, and maybe you just go for days and it's just there.
Yeah.
What would that really be like if you're the character waiting for the hands to come and make you go this way or make you go that way. If you are one of these immortals who just lives forever, has nothing really animating you, you're just like a rock. What happens when someone comes and they actually press forward? But what happens when they when they never do? And you're just there forever.
Yeah, and it seems to be these larger ideas which are the guiding hand to his video game controller. First the journey for immortality, and then the journey back to mortality. But these journeys, I thought they were really fun. We recently read Umberto Eco's Baudolino, which features a lying scoundrel reporting to a historian who is an actually existent historian about all of his adventures, especially going off to find the Holy Grail. And a characteristic of that book would be it would start with very well documented historical things, just like this one. But then the closer you get to this magical object of the Holy Grail, the more mythic these lands become. The less real, the more fantasy. You find the land of satyrs. And this story does the exact same move. The closer he gets to the mythical land of immortality, the more he starts seeing places like the land of the Garamans, who keep their women in common and feed on lions, or the Ogles, deserts where the sand is black, a mountain which on its peak live the satyrs, a nation of fell and savage men given to lewdness. Things like this. Things that you only really find in like medieval illustrated manuscripts. You know what I mean?
You got to go on the journey. You got to find those things. The black sand beaches, they really bring joy to life.
I think there's one of those in Hawaii.
I've been there many times. Yes, right down the road. The city, I think, is very interesting. The idea, the individual who needs to go out and find these different things, these exotic things. I was thinking, too, about this city that the Immortals made, and it's this beautiful city. It's almost kind of Tolkien-esque, where you have it's got the most guards, it's got the most beautiful gates, it's got the most roofs. It's this great city. However, after they finish it, I think they're in it for 100 years, and they say, no, tear it down. They don't really tear it down, but they build it into this crazy Sarah Winchester house. No offense to Sarah Winchester, but just the legend about the house, where there's stairways going this way. There's like pits. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like the gods went crazy, but they're immortals who went crazy. What do you think? We might think a certain society or a certain city or something could last forever, but here they deliberately say, no, we're going to turn it on its head because we've been around too long. Now it's going to go not just into decadence, but deliberately into chaos. How do you think that would be representative, really, of an immortal city, not just an immortal person, which, I mean, they could pivot completely and change, but do you think like an immortal city would have to pivot back and forth between chaos and order and chaos and order?
I think that I haven't seen anything in Borges that makes me feel like there's a flipping back and forth. It seems to me like a much more slow and steady degradation. When he gets there, he says this great line. He's like, "This palace is a fabrication of the gods." I thought at the beginning. I explored the uninhabited interiors and corrected myself. The gods who built it have died. I noted its peculiarities and said, the gods who built it were mad. And I just never get the sense that anyone is necessarily coming out of their slumber. And, when you look at how he acts at the end, when he's become the bookseller at the end of the story, he has come out of it, but he seems to be barely hanging on. There's one connection that I wanted to call attention to, which is that the bookseller's name is Joseph Cartaphilus, which is supposed to be the name of the Wandering Jew from the Wandering Jew legends. Have you heard of this legend?
But I don't know much about it.
Oh, the idea is basically there's a story that during crucifixion, there was some guy in Jerusalem who made fun of Jesus, and Jesus said, you will never die until I come back. And, as there hasn't been the second coming of Jesus, supposedly there is a Jewish man who is immortal and walking the earth, going from place to place, who cannot die. And that's the legend of the Wandering Jew.
Huh.
Yeah.
So Borges put it into the story. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. He named the bookseller after this person. Now, I guess there's I think that there's maybe a chicken or egg scenario going on. I think that like what's going on here is like, because he gives us his own name, he gives us his Roman name at the beginning of the story, because remember, he's like, oh, I have my legion, whatever. I think that maybe he's just adopted the mythical name of or the legendary name of this character, taken it as his own, appropriated it as like a kind of knowing wink. But I don't know. It's fun. I think I love an Easter egg. I guess that's what it boils down to. I love an Easter egg.
I think it's great that Borges uses so many Easter eggs. We have that story. We have Plato. It's fun to see histories come in and make the story seem so real, and then also be essential to this idea of you will always contain all of these histories because you'll be alive forever.
Well, we just got a few more immortality stories left. We might only have one immortality story left. Well, let's turn the corner. We think we got Robert Heinlein coming up next. I can't wait to read it. I'll talk to you later, Bob.
Talk to you later, Zach.